We go first tonight to a newsmaker interview with Gary Hart. The former Colorado senator jarred the world of politics yesterday by re-entering the race for the 1988 Democratic presidential nomination, just 7 months after his relationship with Miami model Donna caused him to withdraw. I talked to him earlier this evening from public station WENH in Durham, New Hampshire. Senator, welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's been 30 hours or so now since you re-entered this race. Was it the right decision?
Yes, it was, absolutely. I've never had a minute's hesitation about it, and the response has been great.
Flesh that out. In what way has it been great?
Well, I think just the personal contact. We made a decision right away to go into the streets, not to try to do the conventional campaigning in people's houses in small groups, but go out to the people. This is a campaign that's going directly to the people, as I explained yesterday, and people's responses, I knew it would be, was very, very warm and very hospitable, very, very encouraging, both in New Hampshire and in Maine.
What did they say to you?
Glad you're back in the race. You did the right thing. We're for you.
Okay. One of the first things you did today, you went to high school there in New Hampshire, and immediately, right out of the bat, you got questions about Donna Rice, about...
No, that's not true. That's not true. I had a lot of questions on serious issues before that came up, but I just wanted to make sure you understood that.
Okay. But at the high school in New Hampshire, you were asked about these matters. Mm-hmm. Do you expect these kinds of questions to continue? Occasionally,
but not very often. The pattern this fall was that the perhaps 1.5 or 2 dozen speeches that I gave, that every other speech or so, someone would ask a question about the events of last May, or the questions of privacy having to do with public officials, and I would answer them. The crowd always seemed, wherever it was, campuses or elsewhere, to be strongly on my side, as they were at the high school today. Frankly, most of the questions having to do with my own personal life come from the press and not from the public. But I want to stress at the high school, that question came very late in the session. It came from a young man who came up afterwards and said, I genuinely wanted to know what you had to say on the issue of privacy, and he said, I'm on your side and want to help you.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think there are still questions being asked about this?
Maybe it's because that's what gets reported.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I think the people of the country want to find out about issues like economic revitalization and opportunity for the future, reforming our military forces, developing a new foreign policy, and that's what I'm prepared to talk about. I think, as I said yesterday, I think issues will continue to be raised by people for whatever reason about my personal life. I don't intend to respond to those, as I said last September.
Why not? Why do you not intend to respond to them?
Because they're nobody's business. What I want to know is what the people of this country think.
Well, just for those who may have missed it, like the Washington Post and like the young man at the high school in New Hampshire, what is your response to your conduct involving women other than your wife that caused you to get out? What is your explanation for that?
Just exactly what I said on Nightline in September, and I don't intend to answer any more questions about it. It's no one else's business.
Now, why is it not anyone else's business?
Because it isn't.
No, but...
It hasn't been the business of the American public for 200 years, and it isn't today.
You don't think it speaks to the question of judgment as to what a person would do as a candidate for President of the United States?
Well, Jim, if I may call you Jim?
You may.
Let's reverse the logic.
All right.
Does it suggest because Ronald Reagan used poor judgment on Irangate that therefore he's unfaithful to his wife?
I don't understand what you mean.
Well, it's exactly the reverse of that logic that you're suggesting.
Yes, but President Reagan has spoken endlessly about the Iran-Contra affair.
And I've spoken endlessly about my personal life, and I don't expect to talk any more about it.
All right. One more quote from one more editorial. The Los Angeles Times. In his announcement on Tuesday, Hart gave no sign that he yet understands his problem or that his announcement is an insult to the American political process.
Let me ask you, I wonder why those editorial writers don't want to let the people decide this issue. Why are they deciding it for the people? Let's take this question to the American people, let them decide. That's what I said yesterday. What is the harm in that? What would happen if the people don't think this is as important as the people who write those editorials do? What would then happen?
Mm-hmm. But in response to those editorials, or to anyone else who may have raised this question either publicly or otherwise, you feel that you have put behind you and you have spoken and you plan to never address it again, the issue of your judgment and all of these other issues, personal conduct, etc.?
There's only one issue, and the answer is yes.
Gail,
and the reason I got out of the race, Mr. Lehrer, as I said back in May, was to try to protect my family. That didn't work out very well because some very nasty and erroneous things were written after I got out of the race. But I wasn't driven from the race. I chose not to continue.
All right, one more editorial.
People out on the streets are very warm and very cordial to me and my wife and my son. They've been great, frankly. And we're going to take this case to the American people and let them decide. I don't think people in Washington or New York in the editorial boardrooms should decide who runs for president. I think the American people should decide. I'm as qualified to govern this country as anybody, including in this race or anybody who's governed this country for the past 200 years. And I intend to continue to make that case, and we're going to let the American people decide this.
You've been accused in the last 30 hours by not editorial writers, but officials or office holders, etc., in your own party as being selfish, of putting your own self-interest above those of the Democratic Party. What's your answer to that, sir?
What's the logic behind their assertions? In what way am I hurting the party?
Well, what they said, as you probably know,
I don't know.
Well, what they said was that here there are 6 candidates in the race. By coming in, you've drawn the attention in a kind of very dramatic way, and you have essentially told the American people and the fellow Democrats that you do not believe these other 6 candidates are qualified.
No, I've never said that, and I will never say that.
I'm telling you that's what they have said. You've said by your action.
Well, no one is, anyone is free to interpret my actions any way they want to. Fact of the matter is, I've been praising these candidates since last May, encouraging people to support them and encouraging them to adopt some of my issues. I said yesterday that none of them had, that I had a different outlook on the problems facing this country, and I felt as an American citizen I had as much right to seek office in this country as anyone else, and that's all. I'm not disparaging those candidates. Look, I belong to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is an open party. It has throughout its history, particularly at its best times in its history, encouraged debate. Now, anybody in Washington, first of all, the Democratic Party doesn't live in Washington. It's all across this country. And let the party out in the country decide whether I'm qualified to run for president or not. I don't know why people are afraid of that notion. I've never hurt this party in 25 years. I've worked for 25 years for the Democratic Party. I've worked for candidates who beat candidates that I supported. I've worked for candidates who were killed in office. I am a regular Democrat. I have done as much for this party as anybody, and I am as entitled to run for office in the Democratic Party as anybody.